Okay, so we have this, right? So let's test it out so you can see that it's actually working. So if we select fetch from API, the first time that you do this is going to ask you for access. So you just click here, give access, advanced, and then you go to the project. Then you select the scopes, in this case all, continue. And that's it, we got the data, right? All right, guys, so short and sweet how you can connect Shopify to a Google Sheet using the API. And in this case, we will use Google Apps Script. So here I have a test store that I created, and you can see that I have two products. One is test 1 and test 2. We have 100 in inventory and 20 in inventory for product 1. And then I added some prices that you will see later on. So it's pretty simple to get an API token here. So you go here to settings, as you can see down below. Then you go here where it says apps and sales channels. And then you click here in develop apps. Then here you can create an app. You can see, you click here and then you just give it a name. In this case, we can do test 3, create app. So once you are here, you can see this one here, configure admin API scopes. So you click here, and then here you select the scopes that you want to use the API with, right? So in this case, I'm going to bring the product details, but also I've noticed that most people use it for getting the orders data. So for example, if you type orders, you can see this one here. So if you are just reading data from orders, you can just click this one. But if you're also writing to a Shopify store, well, you also need to have right scope. In this case, I only need products. I will be reading data from my products. So read, this one is enough. Click save. And then you can go back here in configuration, just go back, and then here you see that this button pops up. So now you just clear install app, and that's it. Now you have the token. So you copy the token, and then we're ready to build the spreadsheet. So we are here in the spreadsheet, and I'm doing everything from scratch so you guys can see everything. So we are here, and then you click in extensions and then app script. You could name the spreadsheet and also the project, but in this case, this is just a demo, so I won't do it. So before I start explaining the code, let's format the project, right? So let's call this, we can call this config, and I will explain why in a minute, config, and then we can have REST here, then we can have GraphQL here, GraphQL, and then we can have something called utils. So why these names? Here in config, we can have everything that is related to like the API token, the store name, everything, so you can modify everything, all the variables easily. So here REST and GraphQL is because you can use either REST or GraphQL when using the Shopify API. Like if you're doing something simple, I would recommend using REST because it's simple to code, simple to understand. But like if you want to do something more complex, or sometimes there are some things that you can only do with the GraphQL the GraphQL API, but in that case, go with the GraphQL API, right? But I will show you how to do in both APIs so you can get a glance at how it works. And then utils is basically some helpers, so just functions that we use here in both files, so we don't mix code. So let's start. Let's start with config. So we have config here, and I already have the code, so I will just walk you through the code so it's faster. So here, this is the config, right? So we have the shop domain. So this is when you are in the store, you can see the first part of the URL is the shop, right? So you just keep the myshopify.com part, and just the first part is the store. In this case, this is my shop domain. Then here you can modify also for the Shopify API version. They tend to update the API, so you can keep it here in case you want to use something new in the API. Otherwise, you can just leave this one. This one is stable. Then we have the access token, right? This is the one that we just got that I explained how to get. Now we have here the sheet name. In this case, as you can see, it's called sheet name one. Sorry, it's called sheet one. But you can call it whatever you want. Just change this here. When you are using REST, when you're making calls to an API, you usually don't get everything at once, right? You get like pages. So you gotta think of it like a book, right? So it gives you the first page, you can read it, you can do whatever, and then if you want more data, you ask for the second page and the third page, and so on and so forth, right? So in this case, the maximum that you can get in the first page for the REST API is 250 items. I just have 2 products, so I just need one, but I will show you how to do pagination. This is called pagination. And then in GraphQL, it's 100, the max that you can get. Also, I set up here variants because some of you guys might use variants, so that might be useful. And this variable sleep between calls is just to be safe. You don't want to hit the API too much too fast because they might ban you, so you cannot make calls. So I think if you wait a little bit and make another call, that you will be in the safer side. So we have here the config, right? So let's start with REST. Actually, before I go into REST, let's do utils. So here we have just 3 functions in utils that might be useful. One is to write the products to a sheet. The other one is to clean the sheet. So I mean, if you are like appending products, you might not need this one, but I mean, because I'm testing, right? So I will delete the data from the sheet and then paste the new data. And this is just for getting the name of the sheet, right? So we need to look up for this sheet here before pasting data in the spreadsheet. Okay, so let's start with REST. So we are here in REST. Let me make this bigger so I can walk you through the code in a simpler, so you can see. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, so this is pretty much the main function. As you can see, we don't have just 100 lines of code. It's pretty simple. So we have here the main function, which is fetch and write products using the Shopify API. I put some comments and some steps so you guys can see and you can guide yourselves. So in this case, for example, we have first, we're getting the sheet name and then we're clearing the sheet, right? As you can, this is the function that I show you in utils, and this one is also in utils. Then this is useful for pagination. As I mentioned, you get the first page and then you can request the second page and so on. So in this case, we start from 0 because or null because we don't have any, right? So step 3, we are looping through the pages and we're getting the products in this case, or getting the data. Before I get into other functions, I will finish with this one and then we go with the next one. So here we're using this function here. I will explain in a minute. And pretty much we're getting the products and the next page. So in this case, it says like, well, what is the next page? If we got 2, the next page is 3 and so on, right? And then we get in the data and then we need to parse that data so we can write it to the sheet. So we parse the data. We'll explain this function also in a minute. And then we are writing the data to a sheet. I put like an if in case there's no data, well, it doesn't break, just continues, right? And then as you can see here, we're using our safe check, so it just waits a little bit and then requests the next page, so it doesn't hit the API too much. Okay, so this next function, right, that the one that we're using here, fetch products Shopify REST. So we're getting which page are we gonna request, and then here we're building the URL for it. So as you can see here, it's HTTP plus the domain of the store, plus this is like some base that they have, and then you're pasting the API version, and then what do you want to get? In this case, it's products, but if you wanted to get orders, you just change this to orders, and you get the orders. In this case, it's products, and then we're setting some params. In this case, what will be the limit of the page? I set to 50, that's the maximum that you can get for the REST API, and then what are the fields. So we want to get the ID, title, handle, variants from the project, from the products. And then here we're building the URL, and this is the call itself. As you can see, we're passing the access token that we got, and that's it. Then we get in here, in case, this is just like in case we have like some errors, the API, something happens. Maybe, you know, like you got banned because you hit the API too much or something. You can have this function here, which is the same one. It's just gonna retry, right? So it's gonna wait, as you can see here, and then retries, so it doesn't break. So once we get the data here in step 4, basically what we are doing is getting this link, which is like when in the response, this part is if there are more pages, right? So if you use that to know if there are more pages, so we will request the next one in the next iteration. And then that's it, right? We return the products, and if there is a next page, return next page. So now this function, parse products from REST. So basically what it's doing is receiving the products. This one is used here. So you can see parse products from REST. And then basically this is just a parser, right? We're getting the data, and then we're formatting the data so it looks good, and we can put it here in columns, right? You can see that, you know, one column and the next column, so it looks good, right? And then the last one, this is a parser to get the next page part, this one here. Yeah, because that part of the API has a different format, so, you know, we just parse it, we get that data. This is just a parse it, nothing special here. I didn't want to mix it here, so it doesn't look like, you know, you see this function is already long enough, so I didn't want to put it here. But yeah, just a parser, similar to this one, just a parser. Okay, so we have this, right? So let's test it out so you can see that it's actually working. So if we select fetch from API, the first time that you do this is going to ask you for access. So you just click here, give access, advanced, and then you go to the project. Then you select the scopes, in this case all, continue. And that's it, we got the data, right? So you can see here in the spreadsheet, we have the product ID, product title, product handle, the variant ID, the variant title, the SKU. I don't have an SKU because I just created them for the test, but if you have an SKU, you will see a SKU here, price, and inventory. And then let's do the same thing here, but now with GraphQL, right? So I also have the code. And this looks a little bit more complex. That's why I'm saying that if you don't have like a complex thing to do with the API, go with the REST API. Usually it's the simplest to understand. But you know, if you need to do more advanced things, usually this GraphQL tends to be better. And also it's faster, right? Okay, so we save this and let me show you what it's doing. So we have also a main function here. Okay, so the first block is the same one that we had here in the REST API. Get the sheet name and then clean the sheet, right? Simple. Then we're setting here, so here we're initializing two variables. One is cursor and the other one is next page. So next page is the same logic as REST. You know, we get the first page, then it needs to go to a second page, third page, and so on and so forth. Cursor is like where in the page we ended up, right? So for example, let's say we're getting the first page, and we also, well, I set up to a maximum, right, which is 100, but you can change this to 50, let's say, right? So the first page is 50, so you get from product 1 to 50. So the cursor now is 50, right? And then in the next page, let's say you ask for 100 products, right? So now it will start from 50 to 150, if that makes sense, right? So the cursor pretty much is like pointing where left off from the previous call, so it can resume from there. we don't have a cursor starting from 0, so we have null. And in this case, the API returns, is there a next page? If it is, then it returns true. If it is the last page, it's gonna be false. In this case, if there is there a next page, we set up a string. And here in step 3, we're doing a similar loop that we did in REST. We are just looping until it finishes pulling all the data. So yeah, we also have this function that I'm going to explain in a minute. And then once you get the data, we're parsing the data. Then we are writing the data here. And here also I'm adding the same safe check so it doesn't hit the API too much. Waits a little bit, and then from there, just makes the next call and so on, right? Okay, so let's start with this one, right? So this is to get the product. So we're passing the cursor, as I mentioned, where it left off. And then here we're building the URL. In this case, you can see that the only thing that changes is this last part, GraphQL. We're making a call to GraphQL. And then here, we're passing a query instead of params. You know, like in REST, you use params. In here, we're using a query. It's in it looks a little bit more complicated, so that's why I mentioned that it's better to use REST if you don't need to do some complex stuff. But like if you want to optimize, like you want to be fast, because this API tends to be faster. As you can see, we are literally asking for like something exact in the API. So that's the difference, right? Like REST just brings a bunch of data and then you filter. Here, you are asking exactly what we want. So in this case, we're using this from this query products, and then we need these exact nodes: ID, title, SKU, price, and inventory. And then here you can see that we're passing the next page and the cursor. Here we have this payload. Pretty much we're passing the page and the variant page. For the variant part, I will explain after this one. And then here we're passing the payload. And then here we're making this call, like this is the call and we pass in the access token. And this is just like to handle errors. So if the errors for 29, typically is that something that we're getting banned is hitting too hard or something the API. So just wait for a little bit and then make a call again. If it is 200, that's fine. So we can just continue, right? 200 means success. And then this last step is for getting the variants. So as you can see, we're building the edges, the page info and products. This is just to keep the code clean. And then we're passing that data to this function here. So as you can see, this is the next function that I had. It's similar to the other one. We're hitting the same endpoint, but in this case, the only thing that changes is the queries. You can see the query different. We're now asking for variants, and we're passing the product ID that we're getting here. And it's the same logic as the other one, pass a payload, make the call, and then handle errors, pretty much. So once that's done, we're returning the products here, right? So we are here in the function, the main function, which is fetching the products. So we return that. And now this last function is literally just parsing the data. This one, step 4, we're parsing the data, the products that we got, to a sheet, which is the same thing that we had here and REST, so it looks good. So you can see here that it would look like this. So if we were to, the code will clean it, but I can just, for the sake of testing, let's test it out, right? So you can see we did a test, and same thing, we also get the data here. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much how it works. So I will have this code down in the description. Go ahead and get it if you want, it's free. If you find this helpful, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I will be posting videos about Google Sheets and API integration in a regular basis.